Now, it goes without saying that lately, what's been going on at Lucasfilm or with Star Wars films or potential future Star Wars films has been something akin to a game of musical chairs, where everyone who's been announced to be doing a film, every writer or director, eventually has the music stop playing and they lose their chair or their film for one reason or another, and they just keep dwindling them down. One of the apparent exceptions to this, someone who seemed to be finally seated in a chair ready to write a film, was Damon Lindelof, who rumor had it was working on what is finally set to be the next Star Wars film released, that being the one currently slated to come out in December of 2025. He even, in an interview with /Film from a couple days ago, talked about it. However, in that interview, he expressed some doubts, shall we say, about whether or not he was the right man for the job, saying that, "I'll just say that for reasons that I can't get into on this Sunday morning, on this day, the degree of difficulty is extremely, extremely, extremely high. If it can't be great, it shouldn't exist. That's all I'll say, because I have some association with it as you do. Which is, it's the first movie I saw sitting in my dad's lap when I was 4 years old, May of '77. I think it's possible that sometimes when you hold something in such high reverence and esteem, you start to get into the kitchen and you just go, maybe I shouldn't be cooking, maybe I should just be eating. We'll just leave it at that point." And it seems as if the reason why he was having so much difficulty getting into it in the interview was because he had already gotten out of it. And by that I mean he had already, or recently, had exited the project entirely, or maybe was about to, depending on just when the interview was conducted. Or at least that's the case according to a new report from Above the Line that may or may not be true, I suppose. They are the only ones that so far are reporting on this. But apparently he and fellow screenwriter Justin Britt Gibson have exited the project, that they turned in a draft of the script in mid-February and parted ways with the project a few days later, which makes it sound like whatever they turned in, well, it wasn't very good, or just not what they at Lucasfilm, what Kennedy and company were looking for, which sounds a lot like a song we've heard before many times. And based off what Lindelof said in that aforementioned interview about being unsure if he's the guy, he seems to agree that his script wasn't the greatest, or that maybe again he just wasn't the guy for the job, or the one who could deliver whatever it is they wanted. Either way, that, yeah, might make one ask, how in the hell does this keep happening at Lucasfilm? How can they not find somebody who can actually make them a Star Wars film already? And look, I get it, every company or film studio out there has issues and will hire the wrong person from time to time and end up firing them later. I'm sure this type of thing happens all the time in Hollywood. And to some extent, I or we fans just notice it more when it happens to Star Wars, because there's a huge spotlight on the franchise and on Lucasfilm in general, one we're, of course, more prone to pay attention to because we're fans. However, I don't know how many other companies or franchises, or at least franchises anywhere near the size of Star Wars, which has one of, if not the biggest fan bases in the world. Certainly other franchises have had major roadblocks from time to time, or get stuck in production limbo when trying to make a film. But I don't know that I've ever seen such a huge franchise that's very much eagerly and actively trying to make a film ever consistently have this many issues just trying to get it off the ground, much less actually filmed and finished. And at this point, it's hard to even keep track of or remember just how many writers and directors we've seen come and go over the past few years, to say nothing of those that they fired during filming, like with Solo and Rogue One. And the fact that it's been over 3 years now since the last Star Wars film came out, and that I'd be very, very surprised if they actually hit that targeted December 2025 date for the next one, even though it's over 2 years away, which means, in theory, they have plenty of time to make it happen. Anyway, hearing all this, always hearing about those who are coming and going and never anything actually getting done, it doesn't give me any confidence whatsoever in this company and franchise going forward. And at this point, it's just sad and embarrassing for Star Wars and Lucasfilm that it keeps happening, and it's extremely disappointing, again, as a fan who can be very critical of the franchise, but who still holds on to this hope that the ship can be righted, even as I constantly see other fans jumping off because they feel like the franchise isn't heading for an iceberg, but long since crashed into one, and is taking on water fast, and I'm just the band that now refuses to stop playing as the ship goes down. Or that maybe the Disney era just started with a captain who took it in the wrong direction from the very start. And speaking of that, I honestly have no idea how Kathleen Kennedy is still president of Lucasfilm. I have no idea how you keep failing to create films in arguably the biggest film franchise in history, and you haven't been fired yet. And the ones they have made have only seen decreasing returns at the box office. I have no idea how someone who apparently doesn't understand Star Wars, who isn't even a fan of it, is still calling the shots at Lucasfilm. And no, I don't think she's a fan, nor does she even really try to hide that she's not. Just go back to this interview from 2015 and hear her response to being asked this question.
Are you always a Star Wars fan?
I was a Star Wars fan in the fact that I had already decided to become a film major in college when the movie came out. And there's no question that it was a groundbreaking movie. I mean, what George Lucas created right from the moment New Hope was released, I think anybody and everybody, certainly that was studying film like I was, recognized that he had created something that was a complete and total game changer.
I mean, imagine being the president of Lucasfilm and being asked if you've always liked Star Wars or always been a fan, and not immediately just saying yes and going over all the reasons why. Though, hey, I guess we should give her points or credit for her honesty, right? I suppose she could have just given us a BS answer about why she's always liked Star Wars, but something tells me it would have just rang hollow and been even more telling than the answer she did give us. And look, one of the main problems with Kennedy, not that I want to go into this for the millionth time, is that it seems like it's never been about just making the very best movies possible. Hell, basically this whole interview, and granted it's several years old now, and yes, I'll include a link to the whole thing in the description below, but it's her talking about wanting to get more and more women involved with Star Wars, especially in the creation process, about how important that all is to her. Which, no, I don't have a problem with at all. I am cool with more women being brought into the franchise, be that in front of the camera, behind it, or just brought into the fan base in general. I mean, my wife is a huge Star Wars fan and has talked before about how hard that was for her growing up because other girls sometimes gave her a hard time about it, since there is this stigma around being a female fan of such things, or at least there was when she was younger. Maybe that's changing, I don't know. Anyway, I even do a second channel with my wife where we just have a blast talking some Star Wars and doing other fun, stupid things. So in other words, if you are about to take to the comments to say something ridiculous like, Thor doesn't want women in Star Wars, well, to be blunt, you can piss off because that's bullshit. That said, and yeah, I understand wanting to increase audience size and customer base, which I often feel is the real reason for the diversity push, to reach different people with your product, not because you actually care about those people. Anyway, sure, make bringing in more women important, both for the sake of your business and because you think it is something important. But it really shouldn't be basically your top priority, or one of them as president of Lucasfilm. Telling great stories that anyone and everyone can enjoy should be. And I'm not saying that's the only reason why things are in the condition they are at Lucasfilm. I still think it's primarily going back to her, as well as Disney overlords like Bob Iger, just not having a clue what to do with the franchise. They don't know how to make great Star Wars in the first place, or what great Star Wars even is or looks like, because they don't even care about Star Wars. They're not fans of it. They only care what they can do with it, what it can be used for, or how much money they can make off of it. I think Damon Lindelof nailed it when he said in this interview that if it can't be great, it shouldn't exist, meaning stop making crap just to make a quick dollar. Star Wars should be nothing less than the best possible effort one can put forth, that it needs to be handled with a level of thought and care and concern that goes well beyond the norm, and by people who know it and love it. Which doesn't mean we fans can't be understanding or should or do always expect absolute perfection with every single piece of content, but we should always get the best possible effort. It should always be the goal to create the best possible piece of Star Wars content you can if you want us to fork over our money. You can't just keep hiring the who's hot now writers and directors like they have been doing and expect greatness to magically happen. They need to finally find the right people, or maybe promote those right people, or there's going to be more failure in the future. It's really as simple as that. Well, that's it. I'm done for now. So it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any and all of this. What do you think is wrong with Star Wars, and how can it be fixed, or can it? Or maybe you think there's nothing wrong at all and you're happy with everything, who knows? Whatever you do think, you know what to do at this point. Leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.